Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is your host, Webster Tarpley, here in Washington, D.C. Now, let's look at some economic data here. We're in the middle of Wall Street earnings season. How interesting. We'll see how the finance oligarchs and hedge fund hyenas and related jackals on the street have been making out. But first of all, foreclosures continued to rise in the third quarter of 2009, despite the alleged efforts of the Obama administration. We now have a situation where 1 million homes are in the midst of foreclosure. That is up 23%. It's actually just short of 1 million. I think the official figure is an estimated 925,000. We'll call that 1 million homes, 1 million families in the throes of foreclosure. We need legislation to stop that dastardly process dead in its tracks. Ban foreclosures, a freeze, a stop on all foreclosures for 5 years or for the duration of this crisis, and Wall Street eats the losses. God knows they've got enough profits, as we'll tell you in just a minute. We've already had, apparently in the course of 2009, according to these unofficial and estimated data, 250,000 evictions, 250,000 or 230,000 families thrown out on the street by the zombie bankers, even as they are getting money from the TARP, from the Federal Reserve, and from the FDIC. So 1 million homes, approximately, are in the process of being foreclosed on. Now, of course, that's one side of the real economy. The other side of the financial economy, the area of derivatives and looting. J.P. Morgan Chase reports their third quarter earnings, $3.6 billion. The best results for J.P. Morgan Chase in 2 years. Now, of course, we know how they get these results. This is the number one derivatives monster of the world. And what they've been allowed to do now is mark to model. In other words, instead of having to estimate what their worthless, toxic paper would be worth in the market that they claim to admire so much, they don't go to the market. They go to the model, that is to say, a Black-Scholes-based computer program which allows them to estimate anything they want. You can basically call it whatever you like. This institution is bankrupt and insolvent 1,000 times over if we count their derivatives losses, which are conveniently kept in many cases off balance sheet. We have also had Goldman Sachs come in this past week with something around $3 billion. I think Goldman is $3.19 billion in profit. So how about that? 1 million American families are struggling to stay in their homes. 250,000 have already been evicted. And Goldman and J.P. Morgan Chase come in with speculative, parasitical gains in excess of $3 billion each. There's your class enemy. That's who runs the government. And we know the speed dialing arrangements on Tiny Tim Geithner's cell phone. He's got Blank Fine of Goldman Sachs. He's got the Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase, and, of course, Pandit the Bandit of Citibank. And these are the three that made money this year. Citibank, obviously, an even more blatantly bankrupt institution, has come in with a profit of about $100 million, which was considered to be a miracle. So the three favored zombie banks, and of course this is a cartel. This is a state-sponsored compulsory cartel. This is the dictionary definition of the Mussolini fascist corporate state. It's a state-sponsored compulsory cartel of which J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and, of course, Citibank, willy-nilly, are considered to be the members, and they're going to survive. And they're going to survive at your expense and at public expense. Some others not so certain. Bank of America reports $2 billion in losses, and the reports on Tim Geithner's cell phone is that Bank of America is relegated to some outer circle of the sort of a sub-cartel where it's a lot more dicey and their chances of survival are not so good. But it's very interesting that Bank of America is still determined to pay $30 billion of bonuses to their resident hedge fund hyenas, trading jackals, lampreys, and ticks. $30 billion in bonuses, enabled, of course, by the Treasury through the TARP, the bailout, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve. Of course, they could have cut their bonuses down to $28 billion and covered their losses, but they chose not to do that. They're going to have those losses, use those for tax purposes, and pay even less. Probably they pay no corporate income tax at this point. So it's an unending series of scams and frauds. And some people are saying, well, of course, they've got to pay those bonuses because those are in the contracts. This is the biggest joke. When the finance oligarchs want to break a trade union contract, boy, do they break it. We've just seen what happened to General Motors, to Chrysler. The UAW contracts in GM and Chrysler were simply shredded. They didn't last for 1 second. Those contracts meant nothing because those were for blue-collar workers, and they don't count. But in this world of globalized, fascistoid crony capitalism, if there's a hedge fund hyena or a yuppie quant who's going to get a bonus, of course, that's sacrosanct. You can't touch that contract, even though only one parasitical individual is involved. We've also got any number of bad results in earnings season. General Electric, their sales are down 20%. That would be, that might be the industrial remnants that still make up GE. But, of course, General Electric is saved by GE Capital, which is, as we've known, and you can read this in Surviving the Cataclysm, a hedge fund in drag. It's been a hedge fund for low these many years. Capital One also in bad shape. Capital One in trouble because of credit card defaults. And we've got the unemployment figure, as people know. It's 10% officially. If you add in the underemployed, you get to 17%. And through various formulas of adding back in the discouraged workers who have dropped off the rolls completely, you get to something in excess of 21% and perhaps approaching 25%. Let's just remind ourselves, at the time Hitler seized power in Germany, unemployment was thought to be officially 30%. And there's some reason to think that those statistics are more accurate than the U.S. one. So it's a depression. It's a world economic depression, and we've got to have a New Deal recovery program to get out and stop these finance oligarchs from running wild. Don't think Obama will do it. Back in a minute.